Hello and welcome to Unacademy. As part of your Hindu analysis, today we will be discussing 6 important articles out of the Hindu newspaper. But before we start, do remember that the Telegram channel has all the questions in the end of this session. So you will get 5 questions based on all the topics we are covering on our Telegram channel. The link of the Telegram channel is given in the description box. If you have not attempted them, you should. And every day 5 questions based on current affairs will be pushed into that. With this, let's look at the 6 topics we'll cover. The first one is related to a scheme which has just recently been changed in a way. The NPS has now become UPS, which is Unified Pension Scheme. We'll discuss that, a very interesting aspect. Then we'll talk about lateral entry. There was an FAQ article on this and we'll discuss what is the idea, where did it come from and why has it been scrapped or in a way backtracked. Then we'll talk about biotech manufacturing. There's something called a new Bio E3 scheme which has come through. Then Zika virus and an issue with regards to testing. Then update with regards to our Prime Minister being in Ukraine. And last but not the least, the Rajnath Singh is in the US. So therefore, there are a lot of update with regards to defense partnership also. So you can see it's a good mix of paper 2 and paper 3 topics. So with this, let's start our analysis. So the first topic is a new change in the assured pension returns concept. The NPS, the UPS and the OPS are now in question. Now, let's try to understand the larger perspective. Let's try to understand the larger perspective, then we'll go into the nitty-gritty of this topic. See, one of the biggest lures and one of the best things about a government job before 2004 was a very important concept of pension, which is that irrespective of whatever your salary was or whatever the length of service after 25 years was, you were assured a pension. Now, in the OPS, as it is called, Old Pension Scheme, which is still applied to professors and in the academic sphere, but not applied into bureaucracy since 2004, since time immemorial, let's take it from 1950 to 2004, the old pension scheme was in context. Now, the old pension scheme was very simple. You have to complete a certain tenure of your service. Mostly it is kept at 25 years, some cases 20 years. In army it is different. We are talking about civil services here. So 25 years if you complete. Thereafter, if you are, for example, retiring in 1992 and your salary was 1 lakh rupee at the time of your superannuation or your what we call as retirement, you would be entitled to 50,000, taking that 50% is decided as the last drawn salary. 50% was pushed as pension till you are alive, and thereafter to the widow or the widower, which is the family, was given a certain percentage of this amount, and therefore there was no contribution which you had to make. It was just about service. So you got your salary throughout your service, and as part of your loyalty and good service to the government, once you superannuate and, for example, you live up to 2023, you will get a pension, 50% of last drawn salary. We are taking this 1 lakh as an example. Now, in the old pension scheme, there is no complication. There is no concept of market linked, what we call as equity. There is no concept of the contributory aspect that I have to contribute something throughout my service. Now, this is a very good concept for the employee. So, if you are a government servant, this is one of the biggest levers that you get a pension. Now, the problem is this is not good if you look at the employer. So, for the government, this is a very big burden, and with more and more people retiring after a certain point, this becomes a very big component of revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure being the expenditure which is consumptive, does not create assets. Salary is one burden, pension was becoming equally big burden for the government of India, and therefore, in 2004, the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government took a call and a very bold step, and that was to scrap old pension scheme and bring in the concept of NPS, which is new pension scheme, now called National Pension Scheme, because it was only previously open to the what we call as government employees. Now you and me can also contribute to NPS if we want to. So from new to National Pension Scheme. Now, National Pension Scheme is a little bit different in the way that in NPS, there is no concept of service of tenure. Rather, what is more important is how much do you contribute into it throughout your service. For example, I started with a salary of 50,000. So, I decided that I will contribute 10,000 rupees into the NPS every month from my salary. Now, after contributing 1,20,000 a year, what will happen is that the government of India was then going to allocate this money to the Insurance and Provident Fund organization. It was then going to push it into the market and get a return on it and give us a return, and the handling charge was only 0.01%, which is quite low that was. Quite low, later increased to 0.1%. So, the idea was that if you, it's basically a mutual fund, but not run by a private player, but by the government, that they take money from you, they will then create a corpus, that corpus will be invested, that the investment will be taken back, and at the time of you getting 60 years, you will get 60% of the corpus of this fund. So, it's a very straightforward concept that we are talking about NPS, EPF. EPF is for all private employees, which is Employee Provident Fund. We will not talk about that. But when we talk about NPS, the simple point was it was voluntary but compulsory for some government employees. Thereafter, once the money is pushed into, it is pushed into a market linked scheme. So, there was a lot of risk also involved in that. 60% of the corpus could have been withdrawn at the age of 60, 40% is mandatorily be pushed into a pension product via which certain amount of money would be given to you. Tax liability on first 60% 0, after that 40% you have certain. You can show ATC deduction also by contributing to NPS. Now, NPS, because it has become now national pension scheme, you and me can also do this and the same rules will apply to us, but it is a voluntary concept, and the idea is we also can only withdraw 60% and after 40% we have to take a form of pension. So, the idea was, what did the government do is that the government removed its own burden. The burden which the government previously had was it had to pay a salary to the employee throughout its service, and thereafter they had to also push a pension after he is superannuated, which is after 60 years. So, if the employee survives to 10-15 years, there is a very big burden which the government has. This is a utilitarian logic of the government where it is trying to rationalize its expenditure. It is not a capital expenditure, it is a consumptive revenue expenditure. So, after 2004, it was made very simple, let us bring in NPS and let the employee contribute. So, the government only has to make sure that this money does not go into the wrong schemes and does not give a return, and though there is a market aspect to it, keep the risk as down as possible. So, basically the interest was coming, that is pushed as pension to the employee. Now, the problem with NPS is that this impacted the morale of the bureaucracy, and one of the biggest features of bureaucracy, which is permanence of service, being a permanent executive and pension, there was a lot of backlash which came in 2004, but was accepted by the bureaucracy as you have to, in a way of being a status quoist. Now, the idea was NPS was impacting morale and government service in a way was losing its charm a little bit, and vis-a-vis a professor getting pension and not an IAS officer after superannuation was a problem. And therein the government has realized, and on Saturday they have reversed a 21-year-old measure and brought in the Unified Pension Scheme, the UPS, which is now giving assurances to the employees, which is the idea that now the employee will be eligible for 50% of average basic pay drawn over the past 12 months before his superannuation, meaning for the past 12 months, last 1 year of your service, whatever was the average of your basic pay, not dearness allowance, basic pay, you will get 50% of that as your pension. So, now there is an assurance, it is not contribution, it is assurance, but there is a contributory aspect also, I will tell you. 60% to be given to employee's immediate family after his demise, 10,000 is the minimum amount they will pay if you have 10 years of service, and this applies for 25 years of service, and this has been recommended by the T.V. Somanathan Commission, which was appointed in March of 2023, that you need to review the new pension scheme or the national pension scheme, because government employees need a better fiscal prudence and a better morale with regards to this aspect of their service. So, the idea was, let us push UPS. Now, the ironical part is UPS is not OPS, which is old pension scheme. In old pension scheme, there was no aspect of contribution. Here still 10% of basic pay has to be contributed by the employee and 18.5% will be contributed by the government, which can subject to change. And thereafter, they are giving an assurance that we will give you 50% of average basic pay. So, let's try to create a comparative perspective because this can come in the examination. We have old pension scheme, then we have the aspect of new pension scheme, and then we have what is called as UPS. In old pension scheme, only a specific number of years had to be completed, no contribution, no conditions, 50% of last drawn salary as pension. Government would not like this because the government has to contribute, the employee has not contributed anything. New pension scheme, firstly, it was voluntary to the public and became national pension scheme, but compulsory for government employees. Thereafter, it is contribution based, meaning throughout his service, whatever is the X amount which has been pushed in, out of that 60% could be taken as at 60 years and 40% of that amount would be pushed in as pension based on the amount which is left. It would be then divided into monthly what we call as pension amounts based on the contribution of the employee. So, here the contribution of the government is 0, nil, employee contributes everything. Here government has to do everything, employee has contributed nothing. However, when we talk about the UPS, which is Unified Pension Scheme, it is the existing employees are going to get one time chance to shift to UPS. It is obviously compulsory for all government employees and it is not available to you and me. Now, here, so it becomes compulsory. If you choose to be in NPS, that is totally your call. However, it is also contribution based. But contribution based concept is 10% by the employee for 25 years. This is fixed as of right now, and the Somanatha Commission says 18.5% from the government of the 10% amount. Now, after completing 60 years, you get 50% of last drawn salary as assured pension, and this is the new aspect, which is assured pension. Previously, there is no assurity here, no assured amount, and therefore there is assured pension. Further, the fact that 60% of this amount will be given to the family, and 10,000 has been capped as minimum, meaning if you are under this, you will still get 10,000 rupees as pension. That is for sure, at least 10 years of service should be there. So, in a way, this is not OPS back. A lot of newspapers were talking about OPS yesterday. It is not OPS. It is basically modified NPS. If you look at it now, you will realize that this component remains the same. So, the government has still offsetted. That is why they are still ready, and there is a provision under it that this amount can go up and down as per the government wants. So, the idea is that still there is contribution from the employee, and therefore, it is modified NPS, not modified OPS. And therefore, the UPS, the Unified Pension Scheme, is a good step, but the problem is that it still creates a burden on the employee. The government would be really happy to do this, but it creates a burden on the employee. Now, this is where there is a new rationale which is coming through, which is that somehow the employee has to contribute. So, the idea till 2004, and this is from 2004 to 2024, and this is 2024 onwards, you can see an evolution in the understanding of the bureaucracy, which is that bureaucracy should be incentivized, they should not worry about their salary and pension. Then he or she has to contribute because the government cannot create such a burden on themselves. And then to the idea that let us create an illusion that we are still ready to give them assured pension. So, for any student or any aspirant who thought that UPS is OPS, it isn't. Still contribution is going to be there. There is going to be a burden every month on your salary. So, this is a very important aspect you should know, because you can be asked a comparative question in the mains examination, and further you can be asked about the nitty-gritties of UPS. How is it different from OPS? So, OPS, it was an unfunded, no contributory scheme from employee-employer. Then UPS has a contribution of 10% of their salary and 18% of the salary from the government. So, 10% will be contributed by the employee, 18% of the salary will be contributed by the government, but that contribution you will obviously not get. And thereafter, the 10% threshold is frozen. However, this can go up and down, 18 can go up and down. So, in a way, let us try to summarize all these points in one place, which is UPS 50% of average basic drawn salary of last 12 months, 25 years of service is necessary, 60% can be paid to the spouse, minimum 10,000 for 10 years of service, lump sum payment every year, thereafter inflation adjusted 1st of 2025, which is 1st April 2025, this will be allowed. The existing ones can have switch over one time, and the idea was in NPS there was no guaranteed amount, in UPS there is guaranteed amount. Please note this, because this is going to be a very important point of discussion in the news, and UPS is now what you will also come under. So, as an aspirant for the civil services examination, UPS is the scheme you will come under. 10% you will contribute. As of right now, 18% the government will contribute month on month, year on year. Therefore, in the end of completing 25 years, 60 years of service, 60 years of age you will superannuate, you will get a certain amount. So, very simple, straightforward. Use this table when you will get this in the Telegram channel as a way of revision. Remember, OPS, NPS, UPS. Now, how will UPSC ask you a question? See, the introduction of unified pension scheme is the step in the right direction. Do you agree? Now, this is a pure question based on opinion. So, in this introduction, body, conclusion, you don't have to write it in the examination. In the introduction, you talk about the current affairs, that the government of India recently introduced unified pension scheme, will be applicable from 2024 onwards, specifically 2025 1st April. Now, body, first half talk about the concept, which is how is UPS different from NPS, is different from OPS. And thereafter, you can then go into the second part and say that in a way, it is not OPS being back, it is NPS being modified. Now, it is a step in the right direction because it creates a little bit of assurance and assurity in the mind of the employee, and it is also a step in the right direction because still the public exchequer does not have to pay too much, but we believe that close to 7,000 crores will be an outlay which will have to go out more than what it has been as of right now. So, it is coming on you and me. As a taxpayer, we will be paying for this assured amount, and that burden as of right now is 7,000 crores. So, additional outgo of close to 7,000 crores is expected, and 800 crores for clearing areas. Now, because it is saying do you agree, you have to also talk about in the conclusion the negative aspect, which is though it is a step in the right direction, it creates an additional burden of the government and on you and me, because the government's income is our income taken as income tax and GST and other indirect taxes, and therefore, was there a need for this? Is a questionable aspect. Is this a policy of appeasement? Is also an angle. Is the government trying to in a way service or create a better perception of the services in that regard, though they don't need to, but this aspect has been a sticking point for a very, very long time. They were already in the controversy with regards to the OBOR, which is the army based pension scheme. This is a right direction movement. However, the problem is it is a burden on the Indian economy, and therefore, do we really need this is the question. So, simple straightforward topic. This is the summary of it. Do remember this and don't get confused. After this, let's move to something again related to civil services, which is lateral entry. This has been in the news. A lot of students in class asked me about it also. Let's try to understand what is the lateral entry. Now, how do you clear UPSC? How will you clear UPSC? You will give the prelims examination, then you will give the mains examination, then you will go for the interview personality test, then your name will come in the list. Starting most probably at 11 lakh or 9 lakh students, will go down to 13 to 11,000, then will go down to 1,000 or close to 3,000, and then finally the 1,200, 706 or 600 candidates will get selected. This will take you close to a year and a half if you clear it in your first attempt. There are people, unfortunately, the way it is, there are students who waste 5 years, 3 years, sometimes even 6 years to clear this examination. It's all worth it, sure, but the idea is that you still put in a lot of effort. And in this 1.5 years, you have to leave everything. Every candidate sacrifices, every student has to sacrifice on a lot of things. You have to constantly be updated. It is one of the most prestigious examinations. It is an examination which is based on the fact that you will be in a way the steel frame of India, and therefore it has to be made hard, comprehensive. Not everybody can become an IAS officer. You need to have an acumen, and that is checked through MCQs, through answer writing, through your personality test. Everything is done. After this, you will enter into the services. Thereafter, you will become SDM or you will join at ACP level, whatever it may be. Then you will go up the ranks, and once you enter the service, the aspiration is promotions. The aspiration is to become more and more relevant to the services, and the best ranks that way is when you actually become very comfortable, you have power also to change the world, is secretary rank, deputy secretary rank. Just taking an example from the IAS sector, the equivalent would be, for example, additional CP, joint CP, IG, DIG or DG levels. These are ranks which are considered to be very important. Now, a secretary to a ministry, a deputy secretary to a ministry is a very big position, director, very big position. Now, you, after entering in 2025, will need at least 18 years, at least 15 years of service to reach that rank. And the argument of the government of India as of right now is that because this examination was generalist, meaning general knowledge was checked here, GS, then GS papers were cleared here. You did your optional as a specialized subject, but that may not be relevant for the services. The point is, the most important aspect of UPSC and as you as an aspirant is, you are a generalist, meaning you know history also, you know polity also, you know economics also, you are not a specialist. That is not the purpose of this examination, that is not the demand of this examination. It is not that you have to be a specialist in economics, that you have to be specialist in, for example, history or in polity or in science and technology. You just need to be a generalist, you have to clear cutoffs and you will become an IAS officer, IPS officer, IES officer, whatever it may be. Now, this was always the aspect that as an IAS officer, you should be the master of all trades, which is you should understand as an SDM what are the aspects which are impacting the environment, what is the culture of that district, why there is a certain angle of history into it, how he needs or she needs to be sensitive. Further, what is the political structure, how am I placed in the government of India, thereafter how the society works and what is the geography of that whole district, that I can understand how I can utilize the revenue better. Now, in 2017, the Niti Aayog brought in what is called the 3-year plan. And see, civil services reform is not something new. Civil services reform by the ARC reports, for a very long time people talk about police reform, civil services reform, standard things. Now, the aspect was that in 2017, Niti Aayog in the 3-year plan said, in process of civil services reform, we need specialists. We need specialists, which is the concept that we need a industry, what we call as expert, for example, in the IT department. So, for the rank of secretary to the Ministry of Information and Technology, We need a person who understands information technology properly. He or she has worked in a private company or in an institute, or is a private individual, not a civil servant who has not gone through this painful process which you are going through. He or she has excelled in their own field via their BTechs, MBAs, whatever it may be. They are their specialists. So, for example, the secretary to the Department of Sciences should be a scientist. So, the idea was we have to recruit specialists, and the logic of the Government of India has always been very, very clear. The DOPT has quoted this, is that we need fresh talent. This is the twin objectives, but we also need specialized knowledge and expertise in the domain area. And the candidates therefore can be taken from the private sector, government sector undertaking, public sector undertaking, state sector, state government, autonomous bodies, statutory organizations, universities, recognized research institutes, and they introduce the concept of lateral entry, which is basically talking about horizontal entry for 3 to 5 years. So, basically you are moving up the ranks from being the concept of an SDM, then you will become a DM, maybe DMDC, then you will become additional secretary, then you will become deputy secretary, you will become a secretary, then you may become cabinet secretary. The point is you are going vertically up, and that is why the word lateral entry, that they are trying to bring in entries here who have no service record previously and have not cleared the UPSC examination. And the idea was, if we bring these men and women who are specialists, we will have better policy. Now, this basically undercuts the purpose of UPSC only. If you want specialists, then change the pattern of the examination. This is called a short-term solution. The systemic solution is not there. It's a short-term solution. It's a very, what we call as very small post-goal idea that I need a specialist, I will get it. But in the end, you still have a generalist what we call as civil services. That is the point. That is how the British introduced it. We have actually not even changed. If you go into the history of civil services, ICS examination, the same pattern was there. PT, mains and interview. Difference was that Latin and theology and what we call as European subjects were taught. Still people cleared it. Indianization of Indian civil services was very important. Demand of the moderates, a very important demand of the national movement. But the idea still was a generalist is needed, not a specialist. Now, with Niti Aayog's idea of 2017, in 2019 for the first time, 63 positions were advertised for lateral entry. This is not the first time it is happening. In 2019 it happened, and previously it has also happened in 2021. 31 positions rather, 31 positions in 2021 and 63 positions in 2019. And a lot of applications also came. Close to 1400 applications had come in 2021, out of which 31 were appointments done, others were left. Here also a lot of recruitment was done. 7 such individuals left the services midway because they did not understand what was the point of what we call as bureaucratic process. So, when we talk about lateral entry, let us be very clear, it is not a new thing. It has been in the ranks since 2017, Niti Aayog report, 2019, then 2021. 2024 was another such attempt to recruit through lateral entry. Now, I hope that you understand the government's logic of lateral entry, which is specialists need to enter, fresh talent needs to come through. However, the aspect which needs to be also understood is then it is not systemically changing the civil services. Then the problem is the person, if you are the deputy secretary and your secretary is a specialist coming from lateral entry, he doesn't understand governmental procedure. They will make recommendations, they will do things not understanding that the government is bound by a certain budget, every department has a budget and there is a certain procedure which has to be followed. Then what is the point of having the Labasna training itself? Because you train an IAS officer, you bring in an industry expert, sure, create a special purpose vehicle, create a new body, bring in the specialist. But the fact if you make them a secretary, he or she doesn't know how the government works. And in that 3 to 5 years, it will half time, it will be either the government stopping him from or stopping her from doing something or not understanding the process itself. Now, this has not been the opposition, but this is the inherent flawed logic of lateral entry, but also has its merits and demerits. You can't obviously say that the government of India has not thought about it. They have thought, need of specialists is there. For example, Department of Space should have somebody who understands space technology. Finance department, defense department, these are very specialized services and specialized ministries. We also have specialized services, but history honors, political science honors, a BTech or a BSc or doctor is not a specialist of Department of Space. As much as we can be within the ranks, we will not become a specialist like an ISRO specialist. So, the idea is fine, but the point is it's a short-term solution to a more systemic problem. If the government believes that now the need of the hour for the UPSC is, or for the Indian governance is need for specialists, then you have to find a long-term solution. This only undercuts the effort and the you can say the pain which a UPSC aspirant goes through in that 1.5 years and then later deemed not to be fit to become the secretary. Imagine how you would feel as an aspirant, that is one, but after putting in all this effort, after sacrificing so much, once you are eligible to be secretary, government says no, secretary is going to be a person I have brought in from a private sector, I believe he is the specialist. So, then what was the point of going up the ranks? So, therefore, there are two aspects to this, as the article also points out, as a lot of literature in the news, we have discussed this previously also, there are two aspects to it, which is there is merit to this argument also and there is demerit to this argument also, because you are then giving mixed signals to a aspirant like you that what do I do? Should I be a generalist? Should I be a specialist? Because at the end of the day, service is about a career, it's about promotion, it's about getting this post and changing the world. But if you are deemed within your service for 15 years, you are not fit to be a secretary of a certain department, then what's the point of this whole process itself? You have gone through the painstaking process of clearing this examination, going to Rajnath, doing all the MCTPs, which is mid-career training programs, and there is a cost of training an IAS officer also. Then either don't change UPSC, change the internal mechanism training officers, train the officers better in Rajnath, or train the MCTPs as they are called, mid-career training programs, they can be changed. So, the idea is that lateral entry has both merits and demerits. Logic of the government is this, DOPT's logic is this. But if I add one more aspect to this, you will understand why lateral entry actually makes no sense. The government of India as of right now, in a 2023 Parliamentary Standing Committee inquiry, the DOPT has revealed that the total sanction strength of the IAS officers within government of India, meaning this is the maximum we need, this is the exact we need, is 1469. Meaning for government of India to run properly, 1469 IAS officers are needed in India. Guess how many IAS officers exist as of right now against the sanction strength of 1469. I will give you a second to get a number in your mind. And the number as of right now is 442. Vis-a-vis 1469 officers, 442 officers are there in the government of India, all India services, IAS only I am saying. I am not saying other services, only IAS I am saying. This does not include IPS officers needed, this does not include the IFS officers needed, only IS officer, 1469 are needed. And with superannuations, retirements, with the way the government of India has been pushing out UPSC notifications, there are only 442 IS officers as of right now. This is not even half of what is needed. And then you see UPSC notifications with 700, 800, what we call as positions being advertised, within which maximum how much? 50, 70, 100 would be IS officers. or IS seats. So, if there is such a big shortage, you can't fill up 1000 positions through lateral entry. Yes, you are rationalizing, you have already brought in the UPS, you already brought in the NPS. This is where there's a contradiction, it's a paradoxical situation that it is called. It's a dialectical situation. There are self-contradictory aspects to this. We are in shortage of IS officers, but UPSC notifications are not advertising 1000, 1200, 1500. We had 1400 positions advertised. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that it is not a long-term solution. 6331 positions bringing in secretary rank is not going to solve the problem that there is a systemic shortage of officers. One person is managing 3 to 4 departments. 3 to 4 departments. There was a time my father himself had 3 different offices under him as an IPS officer, because there was a dearth of officers in Delhi, in Agmut cadre. And the idea is that you are creating a structure in which either they are overworked or they don't. If you have 3 different offices to manage, you can't concentrate. So, lateral entry 2017 Niti Aayog think tank, very well established, very good point, specialists are needed, but there is a much bigger systemic issue within the bureaucracy right now, which is shortage of officers. So, the sticking point ironically has not become this, though there is a lot of articles coming through in different newspapers, very beautiful articles coming in different aspects, which are talking about this larger need for administrative reform, and it's a dire situation where multiple ministries have one secretary. The sticking point over lateral entry was not this. The sticking point was when you give the UPSC examination and out of the 700 seats, you have reservation applied. Quotas and reservations are there. For disabled, for SC, ST, OBC, EWS, general, there are quotas applied. And therefore, positive discrimination through the Constitution of India is done in the form of recruiting men and women. Now, when a single post is advertised, meaning I need the Secretary of Finance Department, according to DOPT rules and according to the Civil Services Act, the concept of reservation and quota is not applied. And ironically, the uproar in the parliament, the outrage in the parliament is not over this being a short-term solution, not a system. The systemic issue is other. The fact was that why is reservation and quotas not being applied? And this in turn led to the lateral entry notification being backtracked for reconsideration. Now, the question is, how do you handle this type of question in the examination? Because you obviously cannot criticize the UPSC, you obviously cannot criticize the government of India, you are aspiring to work under them. So, for a question like this, which is the lateral entry into civil services is a makeshift or short-term solution for a more systemic issue, critically analyze, never become too emotional. Give an answer which is balanced, but don't become emotional, in which that you are basically giving too negative, too positive. So, in this type of question, introduction, body, conclusion, very simply talk about the lateral entry concept, that there was a recent controversy over lateral entry. Then be very systematic, historical perspective. 2017 we had a certain Niti Aayog understanding, then 2019, 2021 not the first time. Then give them the logic, what the government of India gives, which is specialist with new fresh talent. We need of the hour specialist, as a Niti Aayog 3-year plan said. Then in the second part of the body, talk about the process through which candidates are selected, and therefore there is a specific emphasis on being a generalist. And therefore, the critical analysis part comes in the last part. Don't be extremely negative. The critical analysis part is going to be, however, it is a short-term solution to the larger dearth of officers in the DOPT, give this data, and thereafter say that this will not solve the larger systemic issue, which is multiple ministries with one officer. Rationalization has become too much, and therefore lateral entry may solve the problem in the short term, but not in the long term. And therefore, you conclude by saying that the logic behind lateral entry is sound. However, its implementation needs to be in such a way that the existing IS officers have incentive to work and contribute to the Indian government. Aspirants also understand that they will not have a career in which there can be a person who has no background in bureaucracy to enter, and also the government of India can get specialists. It can be not lateral entry, it can be committees created in all ministries through a certain statutory law under which specialists need to be taken. Take them as stakeholders rather than officers. Simple, straightforward solution. You have not criticized the government also. You said that specialists also are needed, but the generalist, you, are needed. Simple, straightforward, balanced answer. Don't be extremely negative, don't be extremely positive, be midway. That is the key in mains answer writing. So, I hope that you understand this larger perspective. I have taken this opportunity to give you the larger perspective more than just a specific thing that why was there an outrage. The outrage is over reservation and quota, but the larger issue is that this does not solve a much bigger systemic issue in the government of India, which is dearth of officers. Okay. With this, we will move to now smaller, simpler topics, not as complex as this, which is first a scheme called Bio E3. This basically deals with biomanufacturing, and for you as an aspirant, what is important is that the union government has started to realize that biotechnology should be used for economy, environment and employment. Meaning, biomanufacturing could be the solution for a lot of the problems which India faces today, and the government of India under Bio E3 has identified 6 areas in which bio-based products can change India. First is bio-based chemicals and enzymes, which are needed in medical procedures, in medical industry, in healthcare sector. Then functional foods and smart proteins, with India having a lot of malnutrition and the nutritional value of most of our diet is not being met by the food which we are eating right now. There is a need for fortification. That fortification process can be expedited and made better. Then you have precision biotherapeutics, which is again you can use, for example, certain what we call as therapies which are based on biotechnology for example, in cancer, in certain genetic diseases. The need for biotechnology is very, very important. Climate resilient agriculture, that is the biggest concern which India has. Our food security is under question right now, and maybe better resilient crops may be the solution for that. Carbon capture, very critical for global warming, and marine and space research. The need for biotechnology, for example, can be used in a very small thing like a bio toilet in space. If we have the Gaganyaan program, our astronauts have to use toilets, then how do we come up with toilets other than taking it from the Americans? How we can develop, for example, the best example of biomanufacturing is the bio toilets which have now been installed into the Indian railways. That solves a very big issue, and therefore biotechnology is the future, biomanufacturing is the future, and now the government of India has recognized this under Bio E3. So, remember this word Bio E3, employment, environment and economy, and you have to remember these 6 sectors. We will do a question, you will give the answer to this question in the comment section. Tomorrow I will discuss the answer. I will also show who has given the right answer in the comment section. So, you should consider the following sectors: agriculture, medical sciences, marine and space. In which of the above the biomanufacturing process or biomanufacturing can be used? Only 2, only 3, all or none. This is a realistic question which can come from a topic like this. Straightforward, but needs a good understanding of this. Use this understanding to give an answer for this. I would expect everybody to write the answer in the comment box, in the comment section. I will show everybody's name who has given the right answer tomorrow. Okay. With this, we move to a topic which I myself and we have previously discussed, which is Zika virus, but a much bigger issue as of right now, which is the National Institute of Virology and Testing. So, just to refresh your memory, when we talk about Zika virus, Zika is a virus which is spread through the same Aedes mosquito which spreads dengue and chikungunya, and there is genetic and neurological impacts to getting affected with Zika, which can spread through pregnancy also. And the symptoms include mild fever, conjunctivitis, headache and joint pain, skin rash, and can be fatal. Zika is not something new, was very in a way in vogue and in a lot of discussion when we were having the what we call as Olympics in the Brazilian sector. And the idea was, and the World Cup also when we were having it in the South Americas, the idea was that Zika virus has become a very big cause of concern, can spread quickly and can spread human to human contact, and the gestation period is lower, and India has the Aedes mosquito. It already spreads dengue and chikungunya. Zika is just one more which can be added. Zika is fatal, Zika is problematic. Now, the biggest issue which India faces right now is, for example, you and me get affected by Zika. Firstly, the same type of symptoms are projected by other viruses also. Now, I am living in, for example, Pune. Let us not be in Pune, let me stay in Kolkata. The problem is that if they draw my blood and send it to pathology, in Kolkata, there is no way to check if I have Zika or not. In Delhi, I cannot check this. In Jaipur, I can't check this. In Bangalore, I can't check this. All samples once tried for dengue and chikungunya will then have to be sent to the National Institute of Virology, where they will use a kit to basically ascertain if it is Zika or not. This can take 15 to 20 days, and in most cases Zika virus patients are being treated for dengue and chikungunya because you can't very quickly check if it is Zika or not. Now, the idea is first is that there is centralized testing. This aspect has been talked about previously also, that the centralized testing aspect is not something which is ideal. But one more thing which has emerged is through an RTI, that India does not even have its own Zika testing kit. What it has are CDC, which is American testing, what we call as Tripex RT-PCR kits, which comes from Atlanta. So, in India, we are not producing Zika kits itself, though the Institute of Advanced Virology has in Thiruvananthapuram developed its own kit, but because in India you have to test a sample to prove its efficacy, and all samples only going to the National Institute of Virology, accessibility of blood samples itself is very difficult. So, though we have developed an RT-PCR which is better than the CDC one, we still use American made and centralized testing. Now, this is a disaster in making, because it will not take time in India, a tropical country, for Zika to spread quickly as it happened in the South Americas. And therefore, India has not locally developed a Zika virus testing kit. Further, the aspect is that we are using US FDA approved diagnostic test, and it uses synthetic genomic fragments, but we have developed it in India also, but we still have not certified it. This is a very big issue. This is an ongoing issue. So, do understand that this same information can be asked in this type of a question. With the Zika virus mutating, relying on only CDC testing kits is a disaster in making. Do you agree? This is where you have to talk in introduction, and if you talk about in introduction the different aspects related to the concept of Zika and its spread. Zika cases have come in India also. Punjab, Gujarat and Kerala have the highest number of Zika cases. Further, the idea is that in Kerala and in peninsular sector it's even more, and somehow Punjab, because of diasporic population from South America, we are having cases there also. Gujarat, same diasporic population. But the idea is Zika is mutating, keeps on changing. We are using a American kit which we may not get if there's a proper outbreak in America. And with centralized testing, there's already a chance of fatality. Further, there's also the issue that the samples are not going to other institutes which can actually study it and develop and research on it. And therefore, if a Zika outbreak happens, the National Institute of Virology is going to be overwhelmed, and we will then be in trouble, and we will not be able to figure out. It will become an epidemic that we will not be able to figure it out. We will keep on giving them dengue and chikungunya medicines, which is not the way how it should be. So, this is again a GS paper 3, good question based on the aspects which have been in the news. It's again an ongoing, this is not the first article, third or fourth article on this aspect about Zika. The same is true for H5N1 also. The same is true for all rare diseases as of right now, but a disease becoming rare to very common can be over just 1 month, and we need to be ready for that. We have no preparedness for Zika virus in India as of right now. That is the basic point which this article is making. All of what I say is coming out of the article. Now, two simple ones. This is something which is just a standard article which has come in the way of Zelenskyy saying that India, other than agriculture, cyber security, defense, we should go for drone technology and drone development together. Drones have been a very important part of the Russia-Ukraine war also, and this is a very important, this whole meeting itself is very important for the optics of it, first going to Poland and then to Ukraine, and India has Ukrainian and Russian both type of equipment, and this form of connection is very important because previously Zelenskyy was only meeting NATO members, and NATO in the larger concept has shown to be ineffective in the way that they have been able to de-escalate or stop this war. They have only escalated it more with nuclear threats coming from Russia. This is where India, and this can or cannot be the purpose, but we believe that the undertones of this meeting is to basically bring Russia and Ukraine closer through India. In a way, it's like full circle where USSR or the Americans used to be arbitrators in a lot of conflicts which we previously had. India is playing a very important role in managing this conflict, and therefore drones and drone production and the what we call as coziness and this development vis-a-vis Putin knowing and Russia knowing this, it is quite significant in that regard. So, this article is just to update you on one more aspect of this what we call as visit, which is drone technology, something in which India and Ukraine want to in a way come together. Thereafter we come to another defense related aspect where the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh is in the US as of right now, and there was a very important meeting which happened of the Defense Minister with all senior leadership of American defense companies, Lockheed Martin, Boeing and all, and therein under the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, 3 to 4 things have come out. But for you, what is more important is a term which will now become very, very interesting, which is called sonobuoys. So, you know buoyants which are put into water to mark territory, to mark lighthouses. There is something called sonar based or sonobuoyants, which is there is peaceful civil purposes also and there is military purpose also. India as of right now is negotiating with, and the Defense Security Cooperation Agency of the US has notified the Congress, because the Congress has to sanction it, that possibly anti-submarine warfare based sonobuoyants would be sold to the Indian Navy, and we are already taking the MH-60R helicopter from the Americans. We are asking them to equip them with sonobuoyants. Now, the idea of sonobuoyants is very simple. It can be a plane, it can be a helicopter. What they do is that they drop this sonobuoyants into the water, then it splits up into two, and one becomes the transmitter and the other one becomes the hydrophone array, which basically goes underwater. And the idea is it has to pick up signals with regards to any form of disturbance which happens in water. This was actually used in that Titan controversies, the Titanic based idea, that where the last voices which were heard or the banging which was heard against the submarine which crumbled under its own force because of leakages, this was used. So, since then this has been in the news quite a lot, and India has become interested in using this for securing our marine borders in that regard. And the 3 which we are trying to buy are all very high level anti-submarine warfare based sonobuoys. So, for you now this word sonobuoys become very, very important. Remember, it is related to defense, it is not related to research. It is a pure defense based understanding where we are trying to negotiate this in America. So, with this we have completed the set of topics we have to cover today. Just to give you a brief overview, the concept of OPS, NPS and the concept of UPS, we discussed how they are different to one another. We discussed the concept of lateral entry, how it solves a problem but not in the long term. We have discussed drone technology, partnership with Ukraine, the concept of sonobuoys and Zika. So, being a Sunday newspaper, no editorial, I have tried to bring in subject specific UPSC relevant topics for the examination, and I hope you are all sorted with all of this. With this, I will end the session. I will see you tomorrow with another set of issues. Thank you, take care, bye bye. Do attempt the Telegram channel based quiz which is going to be uploaded very soon in the next 1 hour on our Telegram channel. Thank you, take care, bye bye.